minister to those missing range of motion or program appropriately so the person can control that range of motion. And again, didn't need a physical therapist, didn't need a doctor, didn't need a kinesiologist, didn't need computer vision. We needed a coach and an athlete, and that is the sacrosanct area on the planet. So I'm working alongside these people, and every once in a while, we would start to witness a pattern. We would see something and say, hey, can we translate this? And all I did was broadcast my thinking. And I learned early on that a good model, this is the definition of a model has to be able to explain current phenomenon. Why are we teaching benching? Why are we teaching shot putting? Why are we teaching sprinting like this? Why is swimming technique this way? It has to account for future phenomenon. It has to explain and predict what's going to happen with a person. If your quads are stiff, how will you run? What is likely to see a pattern of overreaching? If you're missing hip extension, what does that look like? We should be able to say, if you are missing, you're stiff in the triceps, what is your bench going to look like? We should be able to answer that question. That's not crazy. If you don't have full extension in your shoulder at the bottom of a bench press, what is your bench going to do? We can predict that. And more importantly, we can start to see, hey, what are our tools to get back to that position? And what are our tools and techniques, our skill transfer exercises to reinforce your native skill? So part of what we're trying to do is say, hey, we're starting to identify patterns. So the model is, can I explain why my athletes are moving the way they do and why I coach the way I coach? Can I predict future movement phenomenon, which is transferability, which is the reason we got into the gym in the first place, so we could be better athletes? And finally, can I communicate that to other coaches and the other professionals I work with and to the athlete? And at the heart of that model, because that's the definition of every model. So anytime someone has an ultimate program, whether that's GOTA or you're talking about starting strength, whether you're talking, again, anyone, that's FRC, it doesn't matter, FMS, anyone, they should be able to explain why people are moving that way, predict future movement phenomena, and be able to communicate that language across, so other multiple coaches don't have to have a PhD in your nuanced language. Then, if you're a real coach, what you do is test, retest, and share. Test, retest, and share. I think this works. Let me test it again. Hey, I get you in the gym. We iterate. You're my coach. You're my training partner. We bounce back and forth. And then we're like, hey, this works. And then you bring everyone else in. Test, retest, share. And you might have heard CrossFit say observable, measurable, repeatable. That's sort of an iteration of a model, right? We should be able to observe it. We should have objective measures. And what we have tried to do then in the ready state is say, here are clear objective models for what your shoulder should be able to do. Remember, just so everyone can be clear, let me blow up exercise for you for a second here. Your shoulder does four things. It does four things. It goes overhead, and it rotates, of course. It goes out in front of you, wherever that is. It goes out to the side, right? This is still out to the side. And wait for it. It goes all the way behind you, like you're sprinting or dipping or benching. So every movement that you see, whether you're David Weck and coiling, I should be able to explain that position. That's a front rack shape. Arm is bent, but in front. And my top arm is in an overhead position. I just happen to be side bending, so you get all confused. So the idea here is I should be able to take my model and drop it in on top of anyone else's movement theory, movement piece, and help to explain what's going on, understand what's happening in that place, and then we can move forward. And so that's really the objective measures. And then, of course, the only thing I can really measure is not your pain, because that's so subjective, not your readiness, that's highly subjective. Your genetics are a component of that. What I can measure is how much wattage and power you put down. That's literally all I can see. And if I literally always come back to, can my athletes do this? Yes or no? That's why we're in the gym training, not to only get physiologically stronger, but also to transfer positions and have better transfer to a sport. And did that sport get better? That's all there is. And then however you want to do that is entirely up to you. And in fact, I'll say before I shut up that the coach is the center of the universe for me, because the coach knows her athletes. She knows the tools that she has available to her. She understands the training age and the experience and the training loads and demands and the real life considerations of their athlete. That's called hyperlocality. So the best person in the world to solve these problems is the strength coach, not the position coach, not the sport coach, because They're trying to get kids to play ball or do a thing or learn a technique to win a world championship. And it's really difficult to see someone's missing internal rotation while they swim, unless you're a ninja. The strength coach can see everything.
Talking about that with the coach and the athlete, how do you think that the pendulum may have swung too far with respect to technology? Because you talk about, not being able to fully measure readiness with maybe HRV, omega wave, and maybe you do believe in that, and we can talk about that here. But how do you handle the whole notion of too much technology? Because that's my opinion, that technology is almost taking away from that coach-athlete relationship.
Yeah. All technology, all tools are there to help me work as hard as I can and to have a better understanding of something. I think this is a way of thinking about it, of session cost. And session cost comes from an idea by Ben Ashworth, who was a premier soccer physio in the UK. He's the athletic shoulder, that's him. And he has this idea that every training volume session thing that we do imparts a training cost on the body. What I can do then is drop in HRV, genetics, sleep, nutrition, and say, how do I manage the adaptation response to that training? And those of you with monster HRVs and and it's a pretty powerful tool. We can predict your likelihood of playing an international high-level soccer or footy or not based on your just genetic HRV. You can handle the volume or you can't. And we'll get there eventually because you just can't keep up with the other kids. I mean, we're going to get there, but we have these insights. But the idea is, how do we limit session costs? So let me give you an example. I work with a university, turns out to be an incredible university, top tier team, top 5 team. When I talk to that team, I say to these women, do you think you're out working Stanford? Do you think you're out working USC? Do you think you're out working choose some UCLA? Do you think that your program is doing more work than those programs? Does that other program think they're outworking you? That's impossible. Everyone now, it used to be that you could sneak in and be like, I'm going to outwork you. That ship has sailed. The density, the volumes, the craziness that we're seeing now is insane.
What's up, strength coaches? Taking a quick break away from the show to let you know about our membership site. Not only do we at Strength Coach Network put out the Cheeky Midweeky, but we have a membership site where you gain access to a video library and a members-only forum. Inside the video library, you will have access to over 170 different lectures, which equals over 400 hours of content. Inside of these content, it is every sport you could think of and every topic in strength and conditioning. In our members-only forum, we have career advice and we have topics in strength and conditioning where coaches ask each other questions and we help each other inside the network. You can try the network out for 24 hours for $1 if you are not a member. Click the link down below and you will be able to check us out.
So what we really can control with those athletes is their adaptation response to exercise. How do I reduce the session cost day to day so that we can handle greater volume? You might say recovery, but I'm looking at recovery, I'm looking at adaptation. So a little nuance there. But what I can do is I can out-adapt you, and I can bring in tools and technology to help me understand the cost of the training. And what we saw was, you go smash yourself in the gym for 3 hours, you suck on the pitch. I'm like, okay, we can sort of measure that because the measurement is suckiness. So again, any tool that helps give insight into behaviors so that my athletes can work harder and the coach can work harder and program more and my athletes can show up fresher. Oh, I just sound like Pavel, who said a long time ago, whoever can do the most work and stay the freshest wins, right? That really is the magic. I mean, Floyd Landis, the cyclist, once said, he's like, whoever works the hardest wins. And someone's like, what about overtraining? It's like, you obviously didn't work hard enough to be able to work that hard. And you can, so see rule number 1. And really what we're trying to do with this tool and technology is not take away or create complexity. We're trying to understand how the choices we're making around training athletes or adapting or their lifestyle is impacting my ability to perform more work. The salient feature here is I have 40 women. I have 60 dudes. Which one of those things? We're not going to go hard today because 3 people went out drinking, right? Or you got a bad night's sleep because you're, your child is sick or you had to take a red eye, suddenly we recognize that, okay, some of these things have a little bit limited utility. Like we still need to train hard today because we're on a soccer team or a football pitch. And I think sometimes we have thought about the Bulgarian model where like we can control every weight, every poundage, right? You're Romanian and you've got all the drugs on board and you're in this little tiny room of 12 people. Boy, that's really easy to understand inputs and outputs. Now let's start to add some of these other things. And it is harder to see inputs and outputs. So that's what we're trying to do with tech. But let's remember that the most important thing is that your coach can tell if you're fried or not by your warm-up sets. Did you hop over the fence or did you walk around the fence? As soon as we start moving and you're like, wow, I'm slow today, maybe we pull off the volume and we make those decisions in real time. The ring should support it. But if you get to a world championship, I had a 2-time world champion I'm coaching and facilitating performance coaching with, and he goes on the tour and it's cold. He's sleep deprived. His Whoop is telling him that he's trashed. And I was like, why are you wearing your Whoop? Take your Whoop off, throw it away. The Whoop is for training. The Whoop is not competing because you're going to compete on Tuesday no matter what. So let's go ahead and just control what we can control. So in those situations, we just want to parse through what is essential and, more importantly, not interrupt this relationship between coach and athlete that's happening, because that's the dyad. And it's not just coach telling athlete what to do, but athlete saying, coach, I'm not feeling poppy today. I don't feel like I have a step. Hey, let's pull back on this volume. It's a conversation. And that is a new revolution that's happening.
How do you handle those days where maybe it is, okay, I'm not feeling it, but we still have to push, like that duality of, okay, maybe we do need to pull back, but you know what? Hey, I know you're not, but let's give it a go and see how it works.
Well, we're always going to warm up and do the thing, right? But how can we modulate intensity? We can pull off volume. We can pull off reps, right? We can take bigger rest in between. We can look at, say, hey, we're going to go really intense, but lots of rest in between, right? Or, hey, this is going to be a high volume day and moderate intensity. So a lot of that is, I think, the fear that I hear with coaches and technology is that it's somehow going to short circuit our need to get work done. As you say, hey, I'm not prepared. What do you think, coach? But I come in and we're still going to do the thing. It doesn't mean like you get to take the day off. Dude, you come in and you're cold and shivering. I'm like, why don't we get in the Normatec boots or do some zone 2, or why don't you do a little breathing or mobilizing? There's something to be doing. There's never a day off, right? But I think one of the things that we should be doing is saying, well, maybe we're not going to go to the weight room today, but we're still going to throw today, or we're going to go through the full warm up and see what happens. And let's see as we ramp up a little bit more. I had a really important understanding of this with Mike Bergner, who is one of my original Olympic lifting coaches and senseis. And he's had athletes come in and after brutal high volume days, PR. And, and what ends up happening is athletes really warm, thinking really good. And he's like, look, when the frying pan is hot, we cook. And we often miss opportunities, as you're saying, to be surprised. So, we used to kid around in CrossFit and be like, let's let the intensity find you, or sometimes when my daughters are feeling super beat up in the gym, I'm like, hey, let's just get under the bar and let's see where that goes today. And some days it is surprising. You really aren't limited by what's going on. I think the more advanced an athlete is, the more she knows how to push and not push, and to be able to communicate that with her coaches, right? Because we're like, oh, you were able to handle your typical wattage for 3 of these intervals, not your normal 7.
That's a good point. How do you handle being able to push the field in a positive, way forward as you have? And then how do you address, like you said, you don't punch down, but how do you, in a constructive, best manner way, push the field forward by like, okay, that's not the best way of training people, or how can you keep that curiosity mind and continue to push things in the right direction?
The first thing is always point positive. If you see someone doing something great that you love, talk about it, point it out. The number of like stories I put up of Joel Jamieson in the last year, where I'm like, Joel Jamieson, nailing the conditioning, nailing heart rate, nailing control. Like, look how great this is. So one is I always point positive and I highlight the people that I love. And then when you come in, when I'm asked to come in, I have kind of a strange job sometimes. Can you come into the FBI? Can you come into this military group? Can you come into the English national soccer team? Can you come into the All Blacks? Can you come into the 49ers? When we get there, we say is, what problems are you trying to solve? I don't want to bring in my plan and just slam you. You're really good at your job. You're successful. What problems are you trying to solve? How can I help you solve those problems? Let me show you how I think about this. And then that person can make a choice about whether it works or not. We have our 102 course going on right now, which is our level 2 assessment course. I have some really advanced physios in Australia in it, and who've been physios for 30 years, working with a lot of teams. And they're like, man, I just tried a different assessment that you do, couch stretch instead of Thomas test. And he's like, my athletes could take it home. They got their butt working better in it. We just had better outcomes. I did some hard soft tissue work. They were able to access that position. My athlete who plays pro footy, Australian rules footy, texted me and said, holy crap, I was faster and felt better and my back didn't hurt. And what I love is we start with a hypothesis that there's probably a more efficient way to do it, or a more effective way, or something that I'm missing, or I can have a better understanding of why what I'm doing is working. And then we just express curiosity there. So we never come in and say, you're doing it wrong. That's ridiculous. We come in and say, what problems are you trying to solve? Can I help you, insulate or spread light on that? And I'll tell you, there are great coaches like Travis Mash, who I can call up and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or Dave Spitz, what do you think about this? Or, Nick Gill. I mean, the network of amazing coaches, I don't know anything about eye tracking.
Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button so that way you get notifications of when more content like this gets released. So click that like and subscribe button. And with that, let's get back to the show.
But I'm working with some athletes who that's really important to. I can call up Rachel Balkovec, who is, the first woman strength and conditioning coach in Major League Baseball, who happens to be the first woman manager, and who is an expert in eye tracking, and be like, can you help me understand this? And I think that's what's really fun is as soon as you start, Stuart McMillan is, one of my all-time favorite coaches on the earth. And he probably is the most successful Olympic coach I know, has the most Olympic medals of any coach in the world in any sport. And bobsled, track and field, it's just really amazing. But if you pin him down, he'll be like, I'm not sure I understand anything. I have to apologize to my athletes yesterday because I was shit. And today I'm going to be a little bit better. And he really has this deep understanding of process, of curiosity. And when you do that, that's great humility. You're going to show up and your athletes are going to get buy-in and you're going to go fast and win world championships.
How much do you live within the research of things that it has already been said versus, hey, being curious and kind of probing the problem that is presented in front of you right at that time and place?
Yeah. I love Lane Norton. The data is stronger than your feelings. And yet someone had to go first doing something. And it doesn't mean, remember, what are my two objective measures? Do you have range of motion? Yes or no? If you don't have any hip internal rotation, then your secret scroll program for me isn't working very well, right? Simultaneously, did you go faster? So I have those two things that I'm always looking at: the expression of your range of motion, expressing range of motion, and your biomotor output. And so we should be looking at, can you show me the research that your squat technique works for that 14-year-old on that day? Come on. That's you're never going to get any work done. We want to try to understand complex processes for sure in first principles. And then simultaneously, we want to say, is there a way to, what happens when we manipulate rest? Can you show me all the data? You just couldn't get any work done. You couldn't train a group of 20-year-olds that way. So we have to look at the fact that there were so many good coaches in front of us. What's essential? Let's begin there. And then there is time to party and mess around. Let me introduce you to this thing called the Warmup, where I take wild ideas that I love. I'm like, ooh, that's a good idea. How would I integrate that into my program, which I know is working and I know allows my athletes to feel better and go better, right? Because it's not that complicated. Your hip goes in the front of you and it goes behind you and it goes out to the side of you. That's really all the hip does. So in those positions, I can ask, well, what shape are you training? Is that a better training modality, right? And then you can get into the weeds on what your theory is about, or your methodology as it solves a certain set of problems, and that's cool. Let's put your athletes up against my athletes. One of the things that I think is important is it's really easy to sit on the internet and be like, no. And I'm like, great. It's totally your value and you're right. Can I see who you're working with? Can I see your results? Can I see your transparency of your model? If you're filming yourself in a commercial gym telling everyone else they're wrong, you don't own a training facility, or, like haven't worked with a team, you haven't worked at scale, there's no way you can understand what these other coaches are understanding, or what problems they're trying to solve. Can I see your Olympic medals? Can I see all your world championships? Can I see your I just need to see them. At some point, you need to show me what the results of your work is. Otherwise, it's just feelings. And you may have really valid points, but shouting it is not going to get you invited to the table.
That's actually something that John Wellborn talked about back when we had him on the show, and he talked about how, what he was doing with Power
Full
Athlete.
Disclosure, Wellborn is one of my best friends, just full disclosure.
Good. And so he talked about the fact that, what he did with, I think he called it football. It was football CrossFit, where he said, like, what you were doing and what he was doing, it was the exact opposite of what you just said. It was people that are not just sitting around doing nothing. It was coaches that are actually working with clients and people and getting feedback in real time, because at the end of the day, that's what it's really about. Not just pontificating about, I think he had said it before, like, Cal Deits is isometric, sure, but who have you actually worked with and what have you seen?
That's right. And when you run into someone like Cal Deits, who's running a university program, has lots and lots of medals, then you're like, what does Cal Deits understand? Because he continually puts out monsters. So what you should do is say, hey, coach, can I come watch you coach for a week? Can I just show up at 5 a.m. and watch you coach and just be a fly on the wall? And guess what? 100 out of 100% of the time, coaches will be like, hell yeah. Banana bread at work? Hell yeah.
It's you said the 49ers. It's supposed to be pumpkin bread, right? And didn't you just see that most recently with Kittle and them? It's pumpkin bread.
It's so good.
It really is.
Let me talk. The Niners really have an impressive strength and conditioning staff. I just want to shout them out for being so amazing. So amazing that very few guys go outside and have their own special guy, because the Niners staff are so great. You can be fed at the Niners facility year round. They are sneaky. They are creating really, really good culture and monsters.
Yeah, no. And I mean, our Keir Wyndham Flatt, the founder and prior owner of Strength Coach Network, has been out there a couple times. And so, we're going to have to get somebody from the Niners on the show here again. What are your thoughts on strength being added to dysfunction? Because you kind of talked about that before when you said first 2 questions, like, hey, do you have the range of motion? If no, that original thought of don't add strength to dysfunction from the FMS, how would you handle somebody saying that?
We wouldn't get anything done, would we?
Correct. Thank you. That's my point.
So what it means is we're just going to squat a little higher today. That's all it means. Like, no problem. People love to poop on Joel Seedman.
Yeah.
And let me just say that his athletes don't dump their knees. Their arches don't collapse. They don't do weird stuff with their backs. One of the things that I think we could look at, and again, approaching people with curiosity, I don't think anyone has the secret squirrel program. It's weird that the Chinese get people to the Olympics, Americans get people to the Olympics, the Romanian, I'm like, we all lift and have different styles, but man, it all looks the same at the end. It looks really the same. And, one of the things that I think is that we can continue to manage the first order of business when someone doesn't have access to range is to not let them default into positions that are less useful, positions that, and what you could say for a while, you could say, hey, that's compensation. But even, the original language we all heard was fault, error, right? And I'm like, this may be the only way the athlete can move. So is that really a fault? So what we can say is this is a compensation. You're working around a problem, but you might say dysfunctional strategy or less effective strategy. Whatever doesn't hurt your feelings is fine with me. But what I'm looking for is transfer. And I'm looking for specifically that the universal principles of lifting actually transfer to the universal principles of sport. There was a old football coach I was working with, and he was like, I like the bench. It ties the arms to the body. And you may have heard me say that before. And he didn't really know what, but he knew that kids who could bench could break the crap out of the bar and were wickedly stable. And when they tackled, their elbows didn't flare and they didn't get their arms ripped off and they didn't break tackles because they could grab someone and create high levels of torque and rotation and make that shoulder stable. And they were gnarly to fight. That was a gnarly person. So here is a coach who's like, this bench press doesn't just make me stronger. It teaches me principles of better motion. That's really stinking cool. And when we start to go into the movements, we were like, oh, that's really, I get it. Why we like to use rings and why we can use dumbbells, because it allows us to create better, more stable postures of higher intensity that can allow me to transfer my skill to other things. So if my athletes are always turning their feet out and dump on their arches in their crappy Nike shoes or whatever they're wearing, you know, their vanity shoes, didn't mean to throw Nike under the bus. Everyone take it down a notch. And all of a sudden you're like, well, why are you cutting that way? You know, because no triple jumper lands with their foot turned out like a duck. No one cuts with their foot like a duck. You can't do that in effectively position. So what we ask is, why are you training? Well, it turns out this will get me banned on the internet. You're going to love this. Squatting is a low power movement. You can do whatever you want when you squat. You want to turn your feet out, slam your knees in, it's low power. It doesn't matter. It's squatting. Look at one of the highest rates of force production, highest power outputages in all of sport. It's the second push or second pull in Olympic lifting, right? People will maybe agree, maybe it's not the highest. It's pretty high. It's a lot of power.
What's up, strength coaches? Want to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about our sponsor, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is your one-stop shop for online training platform needs as a coach. With TeamBuildr, you're going to be able to program for your athletes whether they're in person or remote. Using TeamBuildr, not only will you be able to program for your athletes, but there are special features such as the leaderboard and locking training with wellness questionnaires. With the leaderboard, you can have an exercise performed that day, whether it be a lift, a sprint, or a jump, and scores can be updated in real time and projected on a TV in the training. Wellness questionnaires can be used at the beginning of training, and your athletes will have to fill them out prior to being able to train. This ensures that as a coach, you're being able to collect quality data before the athletes train. So, if you're interested in TeamBuildr, click the link down below and find out more information. Let's get back to the show.
Look at the foot position most of those athletes choose. It's a much straighter foot position. It's almost like they shove their knees out to create a really stable position for the hip. The ankle doesn't collapse. You can't tip the foot over. The foot is flat as they're pushing through the ground. And all of a sudden you're like, why is that foot in that position? Because it's the only position that allows us to handle high speeds. Then they receive that in this ridiculous ass to grass spot. And it doesn't matter because it's a low power position. So what we can start to say is, do the shapes that we're training transfer more effectively? And that gets us beyond, hey, strength solves all problems. I have seen enough really big, strong kids get injured and been enough big, strong kids who didn't win the world championship, but I've seen enough skilled, big, strong kids who rule the world. And it points me at a coach I want to bring on everyone's radar is Franz Bosch. If you're not following Franz Bosch, look at what Franz is doing. And you might not use his bags, but look at how he talks about strength conditioning as coordination practice. We were just talking to Dr. Tommy Wood at University of Washington, and there's a direct correlation between functionality and strength and longevity and brain function, not just body mass, right? So not just having like steroids and BFR for everyone, but like a coordinated body, because it turns out that coordination piece is why we're training. So strength and conditioning is really just coordination training with resistance.
No, I mean, amen to that. And how much of the time is it going to be, maybe somebody has that pain because there's something anatomically that won't show up unless there's an MRI, but how often are you able to actually assess that because you don't have access to it?
Well, what we can say is, you're absolutely right. And what we can say is, does this position transfer to a whole bunch of sports and other positions? So if this is a dead end technique and it's just about moving the most weight up and down a bar, that's not sport. But if it's really about jumping and landing and cutting, I mean, watch people will not turn their feet out and do you'll see ridiculous squatting techniques with feet. And those are power lifters. That's fine. It's a sport that allows them to hit a certain depth and do a thing. And then have you watched, like, no diss, watch Larry Wheels run, watch Mark Bell sprint, What you can ask is, wow, I'm not sure the strongest athletes in the world are still our most athletic. So we start to see, and again, I want to be Larry Wheels when I grow up. I mean, really, that guy's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, we can start to ask how effective, what is my goal, and what are my training helping my goal? And I think that really helps us to get to the heart of the matter, because if I'm just trying to get stronger in the gym, that's recursive training. And that is a little bit what CrossFit suffers from. I do more pull-ups so I can do more pull-ups so I can do more pull-ups. This is super cool. And I never, ever have enough pull-ups, and I can never do enough pull-ups. And pull-ups are too terrible a sport to even mention. Pull-ups are a shitty sport. And so at some point, we want to ask, did all these pull-ups transfer to me swimming more effectively, playing soccer more effectively? There's got to be, what's my goal? My goal is to play my sport and to be better at my sport. And I think we forgot what strength and conditioning is all about. And it's about the application of that. During season, my goal is to just keep you playing. And my strength training looks a little bit different during the season because my goal is to keep you fresh, modulate. But then I get out of that and I'm back into sports preparation mode. And maybe I open up ranges and maybe I work on skills. Then I go into sports specific mode where I'm just flip-flopping back and forth between preparation and season. And what you see is that the only goal is to prepare the athlete to be coached by the team coach.
Talking about, being strong and not always being the best athlete. One of the questions that we've talked about on the show before is somebody strong because they're fast or fast because they're strong? Which one do you think it is?
Ooh. Well, the real question, someone posted recently, I think they were maybe talking about rugby. I watch a lot of rugby on the internet. And, they were just saying that let's not ever give up our athleticism. I was in conversation with Coach Harry Mara, who's one of the best decathlete coaches of all time, heptathlete coaches, probably arguably the most successful coach in that domain ever. And towards the season, he would just carry a medicine ball around and he would say, well, I think you're strong enough. I mean, this sounds like Bondarchuk right here. And what we would see is he'd be like, look, it's really fun to add another kilo to the bench press, but what you really need to do is throw. And it's interesting that Dan John even is like, come train with me. You're going to see how much we throw and how little we lift. We're going to hit a few key lifts and then we're going to go throw and throw and throw and throw and throw. So, to answer your question or get back, how do we develop athleticism? Can athleticism be developed in the gym, or is athleticism best developed in the gym? And you realize probably we need to go take a Frisbee and go play some ultimate Frisbee if we want to develop athleticism. And suddenly, just because you can bench press 300, 200 kilos does not necessarily mean you're going to be first pick for my kickball team. So, that, and again, I still want that kid who can have a big bench to throw the shot put a long way, how do we develop athleticism? And I think the gym sometimes muddles that because it's so easy to quantify and it's so difficult to quantify athleticism.
That's a good point. Backtracking a little bit, how did you get into this field of, being a DPT and getting into athletics and human performance? Like, what was the genesis for you? Did you always know that this was going to be a field that you wanted to get into?
Oh, good question. So first of all, I started out as a broken athlete. So I paddled on the U.S. canoe and kayak team. And I paddled myself right off the U.S. canoe and kayak team with a neck injury. Suddenly my hand wouldn't hold the paddle anymore and I couldn't turn my head. And that ended my professional paddling career after a couple of seasons because I caused that injury. It was just an overuse injury. And that literally, the good old days of strength and conditioning were, let's go as far as we can. Let's go as far as we can, as hard as we can. And when you break, we'll back off, take a little rest, and we'll go a little further next time. That was literally the official model. So that was my background. I grew up as an athlete, paddled on the national team, got injured, realized that I needed to ask some different questions because I looked around and was like, every woman on the national team has had shoulder surgery. So is that a feature of being on the national team? Should my daughters just go ahead and have their shoulder surgery now when they're 16 so they can get on the national team? And what you realize is, wow, can we not prevent any of this? Or is this just a feature of the sport? Like NFL has an injury rate of 100%. Well, let's just go ahead and get injured and fulfill our destiny. So going to physio school, I knew something was there. But before I started physio school, I started work with an Olympic lifting coach, Jim Schmitz, in South San Francisco in very early 2000s. And what I'll say is I knew that there was something to how the best athletes in the world and track athletes were lifting and training, and there's something I needed to learn. I go to physio school and I really struggled with understanding what I was learning in this really good physio program, a really excellent physio program in California, Australian based, heavy manual work, very progressive. This is like, we have masters are my daily instructors. I'm going to the World Center for PNF. We're doing, at Kaiser Vallejo, we're doing rehab on people who are one day out from cerebral vascular accidents. And it's really like, I got to see all the shit. And all the while, I'm like, this has nothing to do with sport. This is a different language. It's a totally parallel path. And you can see is my second year of physio school, I opened CrossFit gym, the 21st CrossFit. And I really struggled to understand what I was learning over here with my experience managing a population and returning them to power and solving all their pain problems. Because people would show up and they would be like, yeah, I hurt my shoulder in NOM or my ACL in college. And my knee hurts after this big run this weekend, or, hey, I don't like to bench because it hurts. The coach I was left holding the bag and all that bullshit. And, what I realized is like, we have to change this model, and we're going to have to move all of these things out behind the wall and put them in the hands of the coach and the athlete if we're going to be serious about this. Because what ended up happening is people would just wait until it was so bad, then they'd go see the doctor, right? And that model doesn't always work if your doctor isn't right at, deadlifting next to you. So that's how I got into this. It was always through the lens of performance. I grew up in a small town in Germany where we had a ski team, and we raced mountain bikes, and we kayak raced, and we all played soccer, and we did as many sports as we could. And we were always going to camps and training with the world champion skiers. And we just had access to a lot of sort of this early thing. So always very high level of sort of emphasis on technicality, that we were having conversations around pressure and technique in the skis. And suddenly that really resonated with me that, there's so much feeling and technical ability that I can develop as a resource to become competent solving a skill.
That makes sense. What advice would you have for young coaches now that might be listening to this, hearing you and knowing the background then? Like, what would you say to anybody that's trying to get started in the field now?
You need so many reps. You're going to suck. Don't worry about it. Start coaching. You don't have to be the perfect coach. The things we're asking coaches to be able to do now, like, it was a lot easier to be a strength coach 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because, you could go on and get Joe DeFranco's CD, his DVD, where he would film an entire session, and you would get to see what that looked like. All the ugly reps, all the athletes not moving perfectly, but you'd be like, oh, he's training football players. I've never seen a strength coach train an actual football player soup to nuts. Mark Bell started filming all of his powerlifting sessions. That's amazing. I mean, that really is remarkable. But also, one of the things that I did early on was I had the good luck to be able to reach out to coaches and have them talk to me. And I didn't shoot them an email asking. I would say, can I schedule time with you? Can I come see you? How can I, it wasn't just like, feed me, and, I picked up the phone one time and called Mark Ripeto's gym, and he spent 45 minutes with me discussing how he thought about the adductors in the squat and why stiff adductors were a problem in the squat. And I remember thinking, if Mark Rippetoe can do that for me, I'm going to have to do that for a generation. And then I would go sleep on a friend's couch and go volunteer my weekends for Coach Bergner, who I taught Olympic lifting. And I remember seeing him there and being like, holy shit, I have so much to learn about Olympic lifting. I'm watching a master teach Olympic lifting to a group of people. Like, I don't know. He has 15,000 skill transfer exercises for one problem. I don't even know what the problem is yet, so, but I did that over and over again. And what I would say is, you cannot become competent by yourself. You need to have coaches around you. You need to train together. You need to go make sojourns and go watch the best coaches in the world. You need to be curious and respectful, and they will give you all the things, all the rope you need to hang yourself. They will give it to you.
How do you handle the two then roles of people that are maybe working in the private sector of balancing being a CEO and being a coach? Like, which hat to wear and how to do a great job doing both, because they're different skills?
come back to that hyperlocality thing. I think the internet has made us think that we have to be relevant in 50 states and 27 countries. And you don't. You just have to be the best coach in your school, in your gym. And that's all you need to do. And people will seek you out. And, the first and foremost is I hope you're obsessed, and what you're seeing is a feature of our mess. And what you're seeing is that all these young coaches who look are confused. I'm like, well, that's my fault. That's your fault because we didn't help them understand what was essential, right? That, I just saw an article on New York Times about fitness information for teenagers on TikTok being just a hot mess of, health and fitness advice. And it really is very, very confusing for kids to come out and say, who's an expert? I can't tell. You look like an expert. You're in the trappings of an expert. Who are the experts? So you should follow and listen to. I think you need to read a lot of books, and I think you need to go to people's courses. We don't like to do that anymore. It puts us out. There was a time in the 2000s where we all traveled a lot, maybe once a month, to go see someone or work with someone or put someone on and try something out. I think you also need to be able to speak it. And, if you haven't box squatted ever, well, let me introduce you to box squatting for a while. Why don't you do a cycle of box squatting? The kids at, who is it? I don't think it's range of strength. Apologies to the person, but the guy's just like, hey, I only Hatfield squatted for a year. I did everything on a Hatfield squat. And he's like, I got so strong. It's so fun. And people are like, what's a Hatfield squat? I'm like, well, there you go. And so I think we're crushed at tools and tactics right now. And it's difficult for people to see what's what. It's going to take a second for you to be worth a shit. I just turned 50 this year. You can tell my don't give a shit attitude, my gray beard. But what you're seeing is I literally finally am a good beginner. Like now I'm like, oh, I have something to contribute. I'm a beginner. And really trying to understand what the experts are doing and these other people I get to work with, it's really extraordinary. It's really, this is a good life's work. But you just need to go to the gym, be early, be cheerful, help people solve their goals. You'll get rich.
That's actually, it's interesting you say that, because one of the questions I had for you is like, what still motivates you? I mean, you have a long laundry list of, things that you've done and people that you've worked with. Like, what still motivates you to do what you do?
This is all I can do. I don't have another skill, so this is it. I want to keep the lights on the house. So that's rationalization. I'm obsessed with this stuff. This is the way I was, working with this team at this university. I started asking questions. The Women's World Cup just happened. I see that we've got catapult data on all those soccer players, right? How far they sprinted, what their number of accelerations were, all the data on GPS data. I go back to this team and I'm like, at this university, I'm like, hey, so what's the data here? It doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? No one knows. We've never looked at it before. And I'm like, well, no one has? No, in the history of this sport, no one really has. I call up my friends who are experts in this. Maybe they did some in this Australia, but we can't find it. No one really knows. And you're like, holy crap. So here's a problem that I'm suddenly becoming, feeding myself on becoming a sports monitoring expert. So I suddenly call my friends who are sports monitoring experts. How do I do this? What should I look at? They're like, you're going to have to invent this, because I try not to be a jerk all the time. My friends at the, are like Golden State Warriors, the head of their sports monitoring. Why don't you come and hang out with him for a day? And I'm like, that thing's really I'd learn a lot doing that. So I could just show up with my hat in my hand and be a beginner again and again and again. And that I can do the rest of my life. I think that's the recipe for just being curious.
How do you think,
and useful?
Why do you think people are, strength and conditioning coaches that now work in these high performance settings where they have so many different people to work with? What do you think is the reason that they're going to be anti-beginner mindset?
Oh, I don't think they're anti-beginner mindset. I think everyone is in those high performance environments is like, oh, I'm so glad I'm part of a team. There's no way I could solve all these problems myself. And they realize that suddenly by this person working with a nutritionist, they solved all these knee problems and all these readiness problems and all these sleep problems, right? And you're like, oh man, I better go learn something about that. So I'm not rate limited by this athlete's nutrition. I think right now, one of the most important things you can be doing is working with a high performance psychologist on mindset. And Shout out to Lenny Wiersma, who is at Cal, who is a friend and mentor. I think he's brilliant. I'm a huge Michael Gervais fan. His brand new book, FOPO, Fear of Others' Opinions, just came out. I think some of the psychology, Brett Bartholomew, art of coaching, being able to be better at communicating. Suddenly we're like, oh man, this has nothing to do with how many reps of squatting we're going to do. It has everything to do with creating an environment where that athlete feels safe and seen and recognized so that she can go out and stomp on the world. And it's going to take a minute. So what I'm proposing, everyone, is not a scarcity mindset, but a real opportunity to expand our footprint and become real performance experts. I want the strength coach to be the very center of the performance hub, because no one has more time with their athletes. No one has more interactions with the performance coach, the physio, the position coach, the nutritionist. Suddenly we can be the person who is the center. And that's why you're seeing people who are becoming directors of high performance really are versed in all of these skills.
Does the terminology strength and conditioning coach, sports performance coach, does that matter in your opinion? Or are we getting, caught up in minutia?
I don't know. It's a fair question. At some point we have to, what is the role? So sometimes we say performance. I'm like, you're a performance coach. Can I see who you're working on their performance with? Once again, I'm like, oh, you work in Formula One. Right. Okay. I understand that. Right. I understand what inputs and outputs are. So, am I a physical therapist? I don't know. I don't really describe myself as one. I don't really think of one. I say I was trained as a physical therapist, but I would say, the most important thing is I'm probably a high performance coach. And what does that mean? I'm a no. What are your problems that you're trying to solve? Let me see if I can help you solve them. But strength and conditioning is the tool set to understand nutrition, readiness, fear. It's a place to rebuild people's confidence. It's a place to develop capacities. We find it's easy to find holes. I found some conditioning holes in a team I was working with, and we brought in a bunch of just echo bikes and started putting people deep into these psychological pain holes. And we just found gigantic gaps in this team at these really, really high, 10-second, 15-second intervals, just not a lot of capacity to change direction, be powerful, repeat that. And then that brought up a lot of psychology of, I better save this energy. And my point is, when you approach these things with humility and curiosity, doesn't mean you're not competent. I'm not saying that, but you just come in and say, every day I'm going to make a hypothesis with my athletes and the people I work with, and we're going to test that hypothesis today, and we're going to recalibrate the hypothesis, and we're going to test it. And the big experiment is the game.
What's your biggest aha moment in the last 2-3 years, or maybe 5 years if you're like, there's a really good one from a little bit further back?
Oh boy. That's a good question. And a question that I don't know if I feel like I'm in kind of a constant state of awe. And I think what's interesting is to see how these fads come and go. Breathing is so hot, and then no, it's not so hot. And what I would ask you is, well, what did you end up taking from that? We found out that we could look at position, we could use it for desensitization, we use it to calm. Like, there was a whole lot of things we got out of that have stuck around. I think the recalibration of recognizing that the most important thing is the person, and then the person doing the sport, and then everything is in service to that. And I think that's really a fun way to approach. I don't know if I've had anything sort of blow my doors off, because I'm around mutants and mutant coaches all the time. So, really, it's so fun to go work with some of these university teams, because I get to sit there, and during games, I have no skin in the game. My work has been done. I just get to watch world-class coaches coach. And that is the coolest thing ever.
Is there anything that you've then taken and been like, hey, you know what? I don't do this anymore. And you're like, I just stopped doing it because it was a principle that I learned back in the day. And maybe you're like, I removed this from my training recently.
Not really. I think, one of the things that I don't do a lot of corrective work. That's just my own bias. And the reason is, I feel like with modern strength and conditioning, I have so many tools to regress and progress movements in the language of strength and conditioning. You know what I mean? We can go single leg, we can do Bulgarian, we can just like, there's so many ways to put the hip into extension and lift that I don't know if I need a whole bunch of single leg bridging to get there. Again, that's a tool. But what I tend to value is say, well, can this exercise that we're doing, if it allows my athletes to reconnect to their heaving snatch balance or snatch, we're going to do it every day, you know? But, when we tend to sort of get in the weeds of complexity, I think, let me answer your question this way. Sorry, everyone. I appreciate a minimalist approach more and more, that we can maximize physiologic adaptation with fewer choices and still have the athlete be fresh enough to go outside and do something. And oftentimes we see really good athletes have been programmed a lot of busy work that makes them feel like they're doing something. It makes them feel like they have agency, and that can have merit, but those exercises do not scale. We cannot value them. What is a clamshell PR? What is your clamshell PR? Can you tell me what it is? And suddenly you're like, okay, I see your point, Kelly. I failed with a 400-pound clamshell load. Yeah. And what we see is, well, that was a 1 rep max. I wanted a 5 rep max there. And once again, it just doesn't hold. It doesn't mean that that's not an appropriate tool, but I think one of the things that happened was a lot of the rehabilitation exercises snuck into strength and conditioning. And they have utility when people can't move, or we're trying to babysit a joint or let a tissue heal, but sometimes they have less utility. I saw a phenomenon in Europe where I saw a lot of people get into functional training, and I was like, okay, we're now going to swing kettlebells and do burpees, and oh, you fell apart under a little metabolic load, and you weren't fast, and you landed like crap as soon as you're breathing hard. So all your functional training actually didn't make you a better athlete. It made you really good at doing things that looked like recursive functional training. You got better at functional training. You did not get better at, moving a weight, a distance, time, or generating force. So I think when I start to see the masters start to ask, what can we take away so that athlete can have more time to herself, can have more time on the court, we can be a lot more sort of nuanced in that. And I think that has been the thing I'm moving further to. So through the lens of, I have this 15-year-old daughter. She's a sophomore. She's 5'10", 6-foot wingspan. She's a goalie. She's a pretty good water polo goalie. I think she's got what it takes to play in college if that's her desire. She wants to. She's a mutant. She really just like is a psychopath in the goal. And between her sports training and schoolwork and still being a 15-year-old girl, Dad is trying to figure out, where are we going to lift? What does it look like? And it looks like a lot of Olympic lifting training. It's very essential. Like, we do 1 or 2 lifts, we work, we get it, we're done. We work on pull-ups and handstands, and we do some classic, strength work on the sides. But though we don't do a lot of wasting time. We get right under the load, and then in between sets, we do something else. And I really am thinking, how can we do less with more? And then really, boy, you really have to have a strong case not to understand Olympic lifting or basic barbell training, because it's so effective.
I mean, you just talked about something that I wrote down where it's like, hey, back in the day, your warm up was light loads of the movement you're going to do, versus nowadays, like you almost have that 15-20 minute warm up. And it's, you talked about the breathing and people just spending too much time in the warm up is something that I have noticed. Yeah. How is that something that you would handle, being the ready state guy? Like, for lack of I feel like I've phrased this question poorly, but I think you understand what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, one of the things is, if you've been sitting on the couch and then you're going to go out and we're going to snatch, it's going to take a minute, right?
Yeah.
To get you warmed up and prepared for that. When we ran a gym for 17 years. So I just want everyone to know, I ran a gym for 17 years. Like, if you run a gym for 17 years, shut the fuck up. And I say that because we had all the good athletes in there. We had moms and dads. We had CrossFit Games people who were trying to go to the CrossFit Games. And that workout starts at 5:45 and people have been awake for 8 minutes. And I was like, dude, how are we going to get any work done this next hour? You've been awake for 8 minutes. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not even ready for this. So in the dream world, We are getting to the bar fast. Look at how the Olympic lifters are warming up. That's what I want. You grab a bar, you start moving. In between sets, you're like, I can't access that, or I do something, or I move around a little bit different. Then I'm back under the bar. And I think now, as an old person, check this out. You know, you're a master's athlete when your shingles vaccine interrupts your bench press. I was like, that sucks. The idea is in between. I'd rather have my athletes take way more warm-up sets. And look, the masters have said that for a long time. 10 sets of 10 with the bar. Like, why are you in a hurry to make this heavy? Are you afraid that another jump between 315 and 350 is going to mess you up? Or, I sometimes go out to my personal deadlifting. Like, I'm going to deadlift 500 every year for the rest of my life. That's one of my personal goals. And deadlifting more than 500 does not make me a better middle-aged bike rider in my neighborhood. It doesn't, but I love deadlifting. So every couple of weeks, I'm like, have I touched 500? Have I touched 500? Can I touch it? But sometimes I'm like, well, 1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates, 4 plates, 5 plates, boom. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's really crappy programming. And when I really have the time, I just take a lot of warm-up sets, and then I mess around and I jump rope. And then I hang from the bar, and then I work on skills. And I saw this cool thing. This came out of this camp, or I like this. And I use the time between my sets to play, to explore my body, to warm up, to move. And I think when you do that, it doesn't have to be 10 minutes on the bike, do a dynamic warm up, like quit that. The first time I heard something about this, people are going to just fast forward this whole episode. I'm just rambling. Bella Caroli, his male gymnast used to warm up playing indoor soccer. So we have at the time, this Romanian superstar coach who may be a psychopath and abusive, but neither here or there. His guys really got hot and sweaty by playing a little game. Like, talk about arousal and people being community and interacting and being like you're in a team and getting hot and touching positions. That's what warm up should be. And so suddenly we can turn this gym time, which is like warm up, into this is really fun. What the hell is coach going to do today? Sportsmith had a great article. Sportsmith HQ had a great article written by one of their coaches. And I apologize, I don't know his name, who worked with a lot of national team volleyball teams, China, and he just recorded all his warm-ups. And it looks like a bunch of buffoonery and fun and gamification. He gives his athletes a chance to compete, and sign me up for that. You know what I mean? I think we can show our creativity and expertise there during our warm-ups.
Oh yeah, for sure. I did that back in the day at Towson with, handball and small groups, and even something as small as the head, shoulders, knees, toes, cone game. Like, you just let the athletes like laugh and giggle, and then it's like, holy cow, coach, like I'm mentally awake. Now all of a sudden I'm physically more awake. And it's crazy how that taps you into something.
And the gym is, wait a minute, a fun place?
Yeah.
This is the great, like the music is on, I'm like, grab a barbell, and everyone's like, F the barbell. And like, we're doing Turkish get-ups and crazy things, and we're not going to put the bar down for 10 minutes. If you put the bar down for the next 10 minutes, you're going to go run. And like, man, where it's Zercher, bicep, tricep. Like, I'm like, how can I torture this human being with this barbell for the next 10 minutes? Everyone's really good to go after that. I just think that there's so many ways, where I'm like, grab the medicine balls, and everyone's like, shit, this is going to suck. And it's so fun to, play Hoover ball and throw the ball around and bounce and throw and toss and be athletes who then quickly are able to get under the bar and load.
Last question I'll ask you before I want to respect your time, but what is something that people don't know about writing a book that you would give them a piece of advice before they ever consider doing it?
Don't do it. Don't do it. I think what's great about writing a book, ultimately, is it's going to force you to really systematize your thinking. And that's really great. I listened to Gray Cook say once, someone asked him, like, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. He's like, if you haven't already started, you're not going to write a book. He's like, I wrote my first book when I was a divorcee. My newborn baby was on the bed asleep. It's like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm writing on the dryer. And so if you're not writing already, you're not going to write a book. So start writing and talking and practicing. Start writing blog posts. Really just like think writing. The goal isn't the book. The book just ends up being a way of service to formalize and organize your your thoughts. And I will say that it's really important. I think the book has become more important now than it has before. Moss Strength just put out a Chinese weightlifting book. I think it's eventually, if you're really, really good and you're sure that you have a system, you need to put in a book. You can't write about a blog. You can't put it on the internet. You need to write a book.
Appreciate that, man. I feel like I could talk with you all day, but want to respect your time. I thank you for coming on.
Because my strength nerds, this is all I want to do and all I talk about. This is the greatest conversation you can have, is sitting down with strength coaches. People don't understand, but this is what is moving the world forward. The gym is the last safe place on the planet.
I agree. And that's my whole goal here, is to continue to make strength and conditioning, push it forward, so that way coaches can be better educated, so they can be more dialed in with their athletes when they're with them. Because helping athletes achieve the best version of themselves is kind of the goal, no?
Yeah. If we, there are a lot of ways to get to to know yourself. And I just think sport is the best way. It's the fastest, the best way. My daughter, last thing I'll say is my daughter was is a freshman at University of Michigan, and went out to one of the big games. They're playing Purdue a couple weeks ago, and watching 110,000 people singing Mr. Brightside, the start of the fourth quarter. It's like a light show. For that one moment, we're all united by sport. I mean, go to a premier soccer game, go to an Olympics, and just feel what's possible with sport. The small model is what we can reproduce every day in the gym.
Amen to that. That's a mic drop moment. We're going to link all your stuff down below, but thank you very much for spending an hour plus with us. We greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about our newest sponsor, Hawkin Dynamics. Hawkin Dynamics builds and designs software and hardware for coaches, athletic trainers, sports scientists, and everybody in the high performance department. Most notably, their use of their force plates with the ease of transportation and ease of use. Not only did I use them when I was at Towson, but I've used them when I've moved back here to Iowa with Tucker at Goldfinch. So check out Hawkin Dynamics in the link down below. Now let's get back to the show. Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button, so that way you get notifications of when more content like this gets released. So click that like and subscribe button, and with that, let's get back to the show.
So, Jeff, as we were talking and not recording for the people to know, it'd be very simplistic and unfair to call what you do just visual training, because hopefully for our listeners and the people that have hung out around Kia stuff and SCN for a while, they already know about the OODA loop and, how do you improve in your sport, how you make decisions, how you detect stuff. But sometimes you sort of have to use the forces around the market of social media to ride that wave, when everyone's just basically, without knowing what it is, coiling the term neuroscience. And you see like all these things that appear to be games and stuff, and they're like, oh, I'm reacting into this and that, and it sounds like we call it sometimes a joke at one of the workplaces I've been, not necessarily saying it's the one I'm right now, but when people explain stuff like that makes no sense. It just looks like something. We always say, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. And that's like sort of the logic that they're using. Because it looks like they're doing random stuff to make people do games, but they follow no principles, no progressions. Doesn't really look like, it's not tracing an object, it's not space awareness, it's not, nothing of that.
Well, I would maybe argue, because I've definitely seen that stuff on social media, but I would argue that maybe some of those people are trying to do things that aren't as simple as just saying, oh, I'm working on spatial awareness. Maybe I'm trying to bring up the right hemispheric cerebellum, and so I'm trying to do things specifically to my left side. And so it looks ridiculous that I'm only doing things with my left side, but there's other things going on. People are poo-pooing right now. What was I just on that? On Twitter and something like that. The Bosu ball, and of course David Weck's name always comes in and shit like that. And I use the Bosu, and it's a good tool. It's just a tool. But we do it for vestibular purposes, not just proprioceptive, which sure, there's a proprioceptive element to that, but there's steps to get to proprioception, because you can break down proprioception into components, subcomponents that you need as well. But for vestibular purposes. So the vestibular system also regulates the sympathetic nervous system, and also activates the posterior chain. So there's vestibular things that I particularly do that may look ridiculous, but there's a purpose to that. So I completely understand what you're saying, how it may seem random and stuff, but if I would implore some people to maybe ask a little more questions rather than just jump to conclusions. Not saying you, I'm just meant people on social media,
No, no,
because
no,
there's a lot
it's
of
fine.
people just throwing shade left and right, and I'm all for throwing shade. That's why I think I'm friends with you guys, and I love Kier. You know what I mean? But I think the more I've gone down this rabbit hole of neurology and stuff like that, I can understand things a little bit better.
What do
Because
you, for anybody listening, the right and left hemisphere stuff, what is the difference? Because I don't know the difference myself.
Yeah. So, neurology is becoming a more and more popular thing in our industry, brain-based approach, or whatever, neurodevelopment or whatever. And I'm certified in the Melillo method, uh, which Dr. Robert Melillo is one of the pioneers of improving ADHD, dyslexia, OCD, autism, things like that. And he starts from a neurological development standpoint. And so if you look at the brain and how it develops from utero till adulthood, it grows from the base of the brain, it grows up, and then it splits into hemispheres, and it grows forward and out. And so we have two hemispheres of the brain. Um, we're one of the few mammals that has that, and so it allows us to have different functions. And in an oversimplistic manner, right brain is far more spatial, aware, uh, more with movement, more with gross motor skills, and left brain is more fine motor skills, more logical, and things like that. So, um, but the problem is, and this is what Dr. Melillo's work has shown, and studies have shown, that if in birth, for whatever reason, we all have in our brainstem, that's where our primitive reflexes are housed. So primitive reflexes are the reflexes that we're all born with. We're all born with the same reflexes. The analogy I tell my clients is, it's like the software. We all buy an iPhone, or we all have a phone that as soon as you buy it, you always have to update shit. And so it's the base software that we're all born with. And sometimes for whatever reason, that software doesn't get updated, and that can cause effect as far as the growth of the brain and then the function of the brain. And that's where you get ADHD, that's where we get OCD, that's where we get tics, that's where we get dyslexia, that's where we get autism and things like that. And so, starting from a neurological standpoint from the base, and then finding what primitive reflexes the person may have, and then working on the hemisphere, finding what hemisphere they are is their weaker side. So for instance, like the left brain is typically, with athletes, and I'm just throwing complete over exaggeration here. Um, I would find most of my athletes are high right brain, low left brain, because they're athletes, so they're more spatial aware, they're more motor driven, and things like that. But that's going to lead to some left brain things. So that's where we'll get maybe some of the academic issues. Myself included, had trouble in school growing up. I was not a very good student for various reasons, and so we'll do specific things to activate the left brain via sensory stimulation, and specific motor movements, because it is a sensory motor brain that we have. And so in order to work on enhancing and developing the brain, we have sensory stimulation. So the right side of your body is generally controlled by the left part of your brain, except for the left nostril for some reason. So we'll do a lot of things where they're standing on their right leg, they're doing right hand stuff, we're doing things off to the right, eye tracking things to the right to stimulate that left brain. I'll put on a TENS pad on someone's right side of their spine. We'll do figure eights with their right hand, trying to activate that left brain. So that's an example, and vice versa for anyone that's more left brain dominant and has a right brain deficiency, just do the opposite. So we'll stand on the left leg and do all types of things. But I hope that probably over answered the question that you had. But each hemisphere to tie it back, I apologize, Justin, has a different function. And so for me, where I'm struggling to answer your question is where I'm struggling with the business side of things, because, you know, trying to nail down a niche and try to market to the niche and stuff is, yeah, I work predominantly, my time is spent with high school, middle school, high school, collegiate athletes, for sure. However, let's say I had this, I'll give you several examples. I had this boy come in, he's senior in high school, he's going to go off to college in several months, and wants to get ready for college football. He's going to play, I believe, D2 college football defensive back. We're going through our assessment and checking hip range of motion, ankle range of motion stuff. And he says, oh, well, you know, I got messed up hips and messed up, I got very flat feet. I got messed up hips because I was a W sitter when I was a kid. So I got introverted hips. I was like, well, right there, W sitting is a sign of a primitive reflex that was not integrated. So now I'm like, okay, there's some neurological things that I got to start checking with this young man. Flat feet, generally, not always, is a sign of unretained, well, not proper development of the feet during development, and then also unretained possible Babinski reflex in the feet. So I know he's going to have some possible sensitivity, tactile sensitivity stuff with his feet, and proprioceptive things going on with his feet, which he did. So now, not only, yes, I got to get this young man physically ready for school, but now I want to try to optimize him and get him his you know, I guess nervous system properly ready for high school and collegiate sports. He also has some attention issues and dyslexia and things like that. And then we go through some primitive reflexes, and he's got about 5 retained primitive reflexes. So how do you market that? How do you, you know, because it's not as simple as just saying, yeah, I train athletes. Well, there's
No,
a little
you
more
don't. But
to
that's,
it.
I mean, like, that's unbelievably interesting. Like, hearing you say all of that, like, you should not apologize, because I was writing stuff down. Like, all right, curious about this, curious about this. Let's start with the W sitting, because I'm assuming that's crisscross applesauce.
No, W sittings where their feet go out and their knees go in. So crisscross applesauce. You know, I hate the
Oh,
phrase
opposite of it.
Indian opposite. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Indian sitting, right, is kind of what the regular term, but W sittings where their feet go out. So that's a sign. So there's a whole bunch of signs that I'll see. So you know, problems that here are some, I guess, some problems that I see in my adults and my kids that could be signs that there's retained primitive reflexes. When we do a lot of crawling patterns or things on our hands, animal flow, people that are athletes that turn their hands out generally can't have their hands straight. That could be a sign that there's a TLR reflex, a tonic labyrinthine reflex. Kids that struggle with knowing their right from their left, right? I don't know if you guys have come across that, or athletes that struggle with that.
I
That's
just did this.
unfortunate.
Is that cheating? I'm like, L for left.
Yeah, that's a sign that there could be a ATNR reflex still retained. Athletes that struggle mirroring you. So you hold up your right hand, you want them to hold up their right hand, but they hold up their left hand. You know what I mean? That have to watch you. People that like they don't understand the auditory aspect of learning. And I get there's different preferential types of learning, but athletes that struggle with understanding their body. I mean, how many times have you ever tried to teach a hinge with an RDL or a squat, and kids just keep rounding their backs, and they just, you know what I mean? There's a disconnect there with a proprioceptive standpoint. Athletes that struggle going slow, that have to do everything fucking fast. You know, everything's fast. There's no pace to them. They're going everything fast, right? There's a rhythm and a timing issue there. So that's a sign of a cerebellum issue, because the cerebellum's meant for rhythm and timing and things like that. Eye-hand coordination issues, you know, so you have a lot of soccer players that prefer soccer versus sports with their hands. Well, usually, not always, because they're not very good with their eye-hand coordination, and that's usually a stage 3 perceptual motor issue as far as development. So again, these are just signs of things. And so you know, I'll ask a lot of times, okay, do you get car sick? Do you like roller coasters? Do you get boat sick? Yeah, I have a good amount of kids that get car sick. Okay, well, there could be an ocular or vestibular issue right there. Boom. Okay, so now I want to check. Because again, the vestibular system has a huge component over controlling the posterior chain system. That's partly where it's developed in neurological development. So now I got to do some vestibular stuff, and we kind of break it down from there. But yeah, sorry. Hopefully that makes a little sense.
Don't like I'm listening to this. I'm like, how do you have a hard time marketing this? Because there's like, you're
Well, how do
literally
you
talking
say,
about.
yeah, well, okay, but like, okay, I train athletes, but then how do you say, okay, you have when I say neurological issues, it does, to me, it comes off as if I'm saying, oh, you got brain cancer. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I mean? There's a weakness in the system, I guess, that we can exploit and try to make better.
I mean, talk
so
about
like,
optimizing their neural capacity.
yeah, so
like you could just talk about the HDMI cord versus coax. No.
yeah, I try to do that, especially when it comes to the eyes. Another sign is athletes that tend to always have one-sided issues. I have a college football player, wide receiver, missed the majority of his senior year of high school football because he tore the labrum in his left hip. He had left ankle issues and left back issues. Not always, but generally that's something to look for. People that have one-sided issues, there's a developmental issue in that side as they were growing up. Maybe they didn't learn to crawl or creep properly. And if you watch them, you'll see kids that learn to crawl with one side. There's tons of videos out there that you can find. And so, okay, now not only do I have to rehab, or I have to say recondition this athlete, now we do some neural things to try to bring up that weaker left side that he always has issues with. And from a postural standpoint, in functional neurology, they talk about midline stability before peripheral mobility. So we want to be able to stabilize our brain and our spine before we start moving things, because that's how we fucking survive. So one of the most midline stabilizing things we have to have is full convergence of the eyes, right? Full meaning all the way to the tip of your nose. I think you and I did a video with you, bud. And man, it's scary to tell you guys, and I'll do a post one of these days. Obviously blocking people's faces, just showing their eyes. You like how few people have full convergence of their eyes, and then you'll find the direction of the hypoconvergent eye, the eye that does not turn in. I'm telling you, you could guess the side of their pain, guess the side of their issues, from lower backs to hip issues to shoulder issues. It's crazy how correlated it is. In I don't know if it's cause and effect, but it's ridiculous. So now, okay, this one boy with the labral issue that I worked with to try to get him ready for college football. Okay, now we got to do some posturology. We got to try to stabilize his feet to correct his eyes. And I'm just throwing a shit ton of stuff out there, gentlemen. You guys are just staring at me like.
Well, no, it's because
So for me, that's just okay. I love your like ideas, and like, okay, now that's you see my dilemma with that course though. It's like, it's not as simple as just saying, oh, here's a 12-week program. I'll put on 5 inches on your vertical. You know what I mean?
I think it's almost like it's your subtitle. Like, that's not what you maybe go in with. And then you start like, hey, yeah, I'm going to help you with this. Hey, in addition to, one of the things that we're going to make it go is we're going to, sprinkle this in. And then once people start seeing it, say, yeah, we can address that. And then if you have older clientele, that's where we're going to address it. Because this is going to be a little bit of a rant before I turn it back over to you. I was going to ask about how this relates to Signal 6 and Square 1. And when I was introducing that to the football team, I was explaining to them, like, look, if the TV on the wall, if the picture's not coming in every time you turn it on and you see the button turning on, you know that it's on the wall. You're not going to get a new TV. So that'd be your muscle, that'd be your bone, right? You don't need to get brand new ones. It's just not freaking plugged in. Right? So if it's not fucking plugged in, you got to make sure that there's power to it. And that's your nervous system. That would be my way of trying to talk with people about it. So number one, does that make any fucking sense? Then number two, how does this relate to Square 1 and Signal 6, if you've heard of them?
Yeah, of course I've heard of it. So Square 1's awesome. I implore everyone to go to Square 1. Square 1 has been a game changer for me. I learned about it, I think it was 2018, 19. Before, I was put onto it. I didn't know what the hell it was. I did a little research. Sean Sherman of Square 1 was kind enough. It was just crazy because I literally learned about it one day, that morning, midday. I'm sending him an email. An hour later, he's messaging me back, hey, I'm driving through Pittsburgh tomorrow. Can I stop by your place? Sure. And so he came by, and what sold me was, I have little kids. I got 3 little kids, and anyone who has parents know that sometimes, you have to sleep in their beds with them. You got to put them to bed, or sometimes you just fall asleep. If you're like me, you just, whether you want to sleep there or not, you just fall asleep. And so I had this crick in my neck that I could not solve with stim, with all the other things that I had. I just couldn't solve. And Sean got me on the table and did his little assessment. And I'm not even joking. Seconds later of an intervention, crick was gone, and it's been gone. And that I was like, shit, okay, I got to learn that. Square one to me is a compensation rebooter. So I think it was Ryan Thompson or Dan Fichter that did a video where I think it was Ryan, where he put on like 5 sweaters and 3 different hats and all these pants, and he said, okay, these are all the layers of compensation that you have in your nervous system, right? And then he just kept taking it off, and that's square one. I hope that explains it, right? So we're just trying to remove the layers of compensation that could cause this discomfort, because yes, we want to address the meat wagon, so to speak, with, okay, my knee hurts, or my quad hurts, or my shoulder's tight, but it's the nervous system that governs that shit. And so square one is an excellent system for addressing the nervous system, to remove compensations, to get you generally to do your daily tasks or whatever you want to do, pain and compensation free. It's awesome. Signal 6 is their like warm up. Signal 6, the way Sean explains, is more of a shotgun approach, right? Here, just do these motions, hold them for these isometric times, and generally you're going to kind of cover all bases. Where square one is a sniper rifle.
Yep.
Right. Okay. We're going very specific now. We're going to look and assess every little joint, every action that it relates to gait, which is the only, so far, that I found, kind of neuro or rehab or whatever you want to call it, path that addresses the gait pattern, which I find is very interesting, since gait pattern is so important to us in brain function and just everything we do. So square one's a game changer, and I highly recommend to everyone.
Same, and I will agree with you where I never had the signal, or I never had square one. I did the signal 6 course, did it to myself. Same thing. I'm like, okay, don't know what the fuck I just did, but when I did this C curve, when I went through all of the movements, and I stood up and I did the 3 squats like they said, it's like, holy cow, that was a little bit easier. And I did it again. It's just like, all right, I don't know what I just did. Nando, I already wrote it down that we'll get him on the show here soon.
Sean, yeah.
How does this, in your opinion, compare to RPR? Because I know you've used both, and I've used both on myself, and
yeah. So RPR, before it was RPR, it was Douglas Heel.
Yep, be activated.
That stuff is kind of what, when that started coming out, when I started learning about that, I think that was 2015. That's what really led me down this just path of looking into alternative shit. People have unfortunately given RPR, Douglas Heel stuff, sometimes in our industry, a bad name because it doesn't work or it doesn't stick. But for me, it's just a tool, and maybe it just wasn't the right tool for that fucking problem. It does work when you find it, and it does work. It's a great tool, but it's just a tool. It's not the end all be all. And sometimes it's been marketed as an end all be all. I've heard some tales, and sometimes people try to use it for that, but it's an awesome tool. RPR is different. RPR addresses more. I guess Douglas Heels, and I never took a Douglas Heels.
They bastardized it. They bastardized it because
they changed it. Yeah,
they did afterwards, because it was originally go get reset from somebody, and then it turned into, oh, we don't teach you to touch people, but that's what Douglas was teaching people. That's what they were teaching people in the early days.
Well, yeah. So for me, when I was trying to study what is this, what is be activated, like what are these points, and I have no idea. I've never spoken with Douglas. I don't know anything about Douglas personally, but they resemble Chapman's reflexes. So anyone interested in Chapman's reflexes, look it up. You can find pictures all over Google of Chapman's reflex points, and they're points related to muscles that I don't know, this guy Chapman found. But what that led me to then is applied kinesiology, and then touch for health. All right, now what is this shit, and why are they using Chapman's reflexes and stuff? And so that's a whole branch of, again, different type of things. That's very helpful, and it's a great tool that I've studied and looked into. They use it's a little more based off of Chinese medicine, but applied kinesiology is from George Goodhart and what, the 1950s and 60s up in Detroit, and it's awesome. A lot of energetic stuff, and again, it's all good stuff, and it's relatively non-invasive in things. Yeah, it's gotten bastardized into other things, and I get it. You know, some coaches can't put their hands on athletes, so I think maybe that's why they're teaching it hands-free. And I don't think it works as good hands-free. I believe in the power of touch and energetic and transfer of energy from one person to another. But I do think it's great. It's all great stuff, and it's a great tool for the toolbox.
100% agree. And you started talking about hands-on and Chinese medicine, and it made me think about Wadango and how Mike will talk about, you know, there's yin and yang and yin and yang. He'll say it, but how he can treat different things on the channel can help things in the channel. Is this with the brain in the right hemisphere, left hemisphere? Is it like that? Am I just swing and miss? What?
Swing and miss. It's all good. I still love you.
Right,
No, they're different. Mike has gone far deeper down the Chinese, studying Chinese medicine and stuff than I have. But no, this is more related to energetic and meridian lines and stuff, and which is related to organs and related to muscles and related to times a day and things like that. So Mike can speak far greater than what I've learned with that. But Touch for Health does use the meridian lines to either turn on a point or if it's too, like a fuse box, if it's got too much power going to it to calm a point. So they have different techniques for that. You know, acupressure. I can't use acupuncture, so acupressure is just using your hands. Again, the neuro stuff, as far as right and left hemisphere, is a bit different. You know, again, my education in that comes from functional neurology and from neurological development with Dr. Malilo.
When you were talking about the sensitivity to the feet, is that why, and I forget the organization that put it out, but the neuro balls that people will use, or the rock mats?
Oh, hell yeah, dude. So there is so much sensitivity and proprioceptors and ectoceptors and down at the bottom of the feet that have a direct connection to the brain. And so part of proprioception is, you can break it down into conscious and unconscious proprioception, and part of that is tactile sensitivity, right? Part of proprioception is be able to feel where your body is, right? And so we have a bucket full of neuro spike balls that we use that make everyone to roll out their feet, roll out their hands, because those are, from a developmental standpoint, to the most sensitive and important things. So we start with that. That's why we use that. But you'll also find with athletes that have, again, let's just say chronic right ankle sprains or left ankles or whatever, foot issues, that if you do some proprioceptive tests, like a 2-point discrimination test or a 2-point toe touch test, that they can't feel it or they don't know where you're touching on their feet. So we do, again, a good bit of proprioceptive, because that is the base of the pyramid. And when I say pyramid, I'm talking the pyramid of learning that was developed by a couple of educational psychologists, Williams and Schnellenberg. That one of the base, right above primitive reflexes is proprioception, and tactile sensitivity is part of that. And so, you know, for instance, a sign that someone has some tactile issues is they have they're very ticklish, or kids always wearing fucking Crocs. I can't tell you, I don't know if there's a correlation. This is just in my head, but kids that always wear Crocs are the kids that have the most fucked up feet.
I thought wearing Crocs was good for you. I just bought a pair. I'm all excited. Like,
nah, bro. No. Anything in posturology, Dr. Bricot, the founder of posturology, who's from France, who's an orthopedic surgeon, they studied and found that anything over 2 millimeters off the ground disrupts the information from your feet to your brain. So that's one of the most important, why I'm a bit of a shoe Nazi with my family. We only wear like minimalist shoes, or we're barefoot all the time. And so my athletes, that's one of the many reasons why we take our shoes off in our facility. My adults, I make them take their shoes off, their socks off if they're willing. Some adults are embarrassed by their feet, so they'll take their socks off. But take care of the feet. It has a huge, profound effect on the posture of their pelvis, the posture of their jaw, the eyes, right? So the eyes, the theory is, a lot of people think the eyes are meant for seeing. Well, we can survive without our eyes. The eyes are meant to really find a horizon, right? The problem is you can't shoot a cannon out of a canoe. So if we have unstable feet or uneven feet, that's not going to stabilize the eyes. And so that's where we get a lot of the people with the convergence issues, tying it back to that. So one of the first things we do in posturology is stabilizing the feet.
I mean, would you say that then, like, a lot of problems could be solved by the ability to work on convergence?
Um, I can't say that. What I will say is if we get the the wheels of the car and then the steering wheel of the car in proper alignment, to begin with, before we even try to fucking drive, I'm willing to bet we'll have less wear and tear.
All right. And then my next question is, because you work in a private sector, you have the ability to. Do you think that this doesn't get put into in a team setting just because for fear of head sport coaches being like, what the fuck are you doing? We ain't doing that.
Um, I can't attest. I know like Annette, I can't pronounce her last name, but for Posture Pro, she's worked with some teams. I know
Uh-huh.
particularly she's doing stuff with the Florida Gators men's basketball program, because she posts about it all the time. I can't. Again, I don't know. I think it's not the easiest to implore in a large group setting, but I don't think it's that hard either. I just think they don't people don't know what they don't know, and we tend to stay away from things that are foreign and things like that. And plus, um, someone's got to be educated to do it, and usually it's not the head coaches.
Well,
Um,
there you go. Now, like hearing you talk that, like that could be one of your sticks too. Is like, hey, this is a ability to teach coaches and teach athletes on it in a simple way where you can start to introduce it, because you mentioned earlier, and I wrote it down, how vestibular can plays a role in posterior chain development. Like posterior chain development is clearly important. How is it that the vestibular system affects posterior chain development?
through the cortical spinal tract, right? There's different pathways of the vestibular system, and through the cortical spinal tract, so it goes down the spine. So that's what the Romberg's test is. Anyone familiar with the Romberg's test?
Nope.
It's where there's several variations of it. The Romberg's test you can do. You stand up, put your feet together. You can cross your arms. In posturology, we point our fingers, and then I'll line up with them and measure. And you close your eyes, and you see how they sway. If they sway, if they move left, if they move right. An advanced version is you put one foot behind the other now, so that really challenges the vestibular system. And close your eyes. So anytime you kind of take the eyes out, that's going to be highly vestibular.
Hold on. So you're
Because the
saying
eyes,
feet together, stand up, cross your arms, and bend over.
no, stand up. No, don't bend over. Just stand up
Guys,
and just
I'm gonna
stand
do.
straight. Can you stand
I'm
there?
gonna do
Can
it
you
right
stand
now.
there for a minute? And
You
then
have to
another
stay here
one would
for a
be,
minute.
yeah, just do it for 10 seconds, Justin. Let's see. But right, put your feet together and see, do you sway? You lean right, you lean left. Now, a more advanced one, Justin, would be now put your right foot behind your left foot, like directly behind your left foot. That is an advanced Romberg test. And these are simple tests you can do with anybody, right? Generally, the side they fall to is the weaker hemisphere.
I felt myself going right and left when my feet were together, and like kind of diagonally when they were together. But I'm gonna do that more later.
Right. But yeah, and so there's easy things. So there's a course, the IP Institute by Matt Belay.
I think
He's up
that's
in
the one.
Montreal. Dude, that's game changer. I mean that stuff. When I first took it, I was like, what the fuck? What is this weird stuff? I'm gonna get athletes on the floor and start rocking and doing all this stuff.
Dude, it looks like you're just
But when you do it and when you steam, when you understand the why, again, it's tying back to our original conversation with
What was it
Fernando.
called again?
When you understand the why, then you're like, oh, this shit. Okay, this shit's a game changer. Like this
what was
stuff.
it called again? IP
IP Institute,
Institute.
and yep, and so it's just my nature. I took the IP Institute. There's 3 levels. Again, it's relatively inexpensive. It's highly applicable. Matt is amazing. He goes above and beyond trying to answer questions, help you. You can message him. He'll send you videos of, okay, if you're doing this right or left. But it's very well thought out course on neurological development, but now making it more applicable for the weight room and for coaches like us. So it's not the Melillo stuff per se, but I mean, you can put the two together, which I
Yeah, I was
do.
about to say, what's the difference for anybody that's listening? Like, all right, I've heard Jeff
The
talk
difference
about
is
them.
Matt doesn't address directly primitive reflexes, and he doesn't directly address the right and left hemispheres. He looks at it from his course is built from, as I mentioned, the pyramid of learning from Williams and Schnellenberg's and the stages of development, the stages of development. And so he goes through the stages with specific exercises and explains the why and gives you the science and all the stuff. And it's fantastic. It is an awesome course. It's very dense in its in the education and the time Matt puts into it. But it's awesome. It's good stuff. But again, it's one of those, looking from the outside in, you see me or Matt or Dan Fichter post videos of kids rocking on the fucking ground or sliding their foot up their leg. You're like, what is this weird shit? Again, but you'll find it where, okay, I posted a video. I have a couple soccer athletes who chronically have a tight right hip. Their right hip's always tight. External rotation is very a struggle for them on their right side. And so in development, well, where is the glute developed? Well, it's developed during creeping and then during crawling. That's where the glutes are developed, and it's tied in with the big toe. So one, we roll out their right foot, and then two, we do some creeping exercise that involves some proprioception, digging their big toe in, similar to how it is when they learn to creep, and then all of a sudden their external rotation improves without having to stretch, because it's a neurological issue. So that's what, tie it back to that story of that college football player, the defensive back, that fine, he was the W sitter. Well, he has flat feet and all this stuff, super tight. Man, we just been doing, part of his warm-ups is just all this neurological stuff, and he's been loosening up. He just played an all-star game. He says he played pain-free, and he's moving better than he has. And again, we don't do too much as far as mobility work. We're doing a lot more of the neuro stuff with him.
Feeding into that, how would you, I heard people talking before too that anterior being the lower cross syndrome is just completely made up. Would that be kind of tied into the like, yes, it is made up because it is all related to neurology and the vestibular system and our reflexes?
Well, it's to me, it's more related to, it could be related to reflexes. So it's related to tone, right? So whether you agree or disagree with posture, some people in our industry really don't agree with posture. Some people do. Regardless, generally, everyone agrees on tone. Tone is the tension in the body, right? So we should have even tone in our body, right? So my right shoulder shouldn't feel tighter than my left shoulder, and I should have equal tone, right? Regardless of my shoulders are tilted or what have you. And so posturology looks at tone, and that's now dealing with the kind of upper and lower cross syndrome. And so in posturology, yeah, we look at anterior tilt, we look at the head and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, what we're really trying to address is the sensors of the body, because posture is just the brain's strategy to overcome gravity. And so it's the major sensors of the body that kind of tell us now how to do that. And the first sensor is the skin of the feet, the bottom of the feet. That is the first sensor. Then the eyes. Then it's going to be your skin and jaw, and then the vestibular system. So we kind of address it in that order. So for someone people dealing with high school kids, they're not going to have a lot of scars. They're not going to have tattoos. They're generally not going to have metal in their mouth unless it's braces, which we can talk about the detrimental effect of braces. They're not going to have missing teeth, right? So generally, you just address their feet, address their eyes. Shit fixes itself pretty good. For old guys like us, happy birthday to you, you old fuck. You know what I mean? We got some things. You know what I mean? I got scars. I'm sure you got scars. We got tattoos, things like that. So now there's a bit more that goes into the postural adjustment and things like that. But upper cross syndrome, again, for me, I look at it from a posturology standpoint is going to be problems with the feet, the eyes, and the jaw.
So, okay, start there. What about with people that have calluses because their toes and they have bunions? Is that like, hey, just get them shaved down, soak your feet? Like, what would you be telling people to do about that stuff then?
Well, I would say adjust your shoes first and foremost. You need different shoes. You need different footwear.
What should they have?
I can't really. I'm going to say minimalist. I'm a minimalist guy. Maybe have to work your way there. Maybe don't just jump right to, a pair of Vivos or something like that. But I'm a minimalist guy. There's criteria that I look for. Again, anything over 2 millimeters is going to disrupt that information. So I'm trying to either get them there or work them down to flatter shoes, looking for wider toe boxes. With the bunions and stuff, you're generally going to see from a posturology standpoint, that's where they're going to have asymmetric feet. They're going to have two different feet, both from a standing standpoint and then from a a balance standpoint, feet that do different things, which to me tells me now that we got asymmetry of tone in the body, and that's going to cause some other things up the chain that's going to get fucked up. And so, as we know in the physical therapy world and in the posture world, the feet are going to affect what's happening at the pelvis. Well, people also know that what happens at the pelvis can affect the jaw, and so it's all connected. And so also, this is where I was optometry. Would the field of optometry would pay a little more attention to posturology, because you can speed up a lot of things that happen at the eyes by correcting the feet. Because as I mentioned before, the eyes are meant to find the horizon. If we can't do that well, we're going to have tracking issues, or we're going to have convergence issues. It's usually because we're trying to shoot a cannon out of a canoe and we got feet that are doing two different things.
So why do braces and tattoos mess it all up?
Because the skin is the largest organ of your body. And so now all of a sudden we're putting this foreign substance into our skin. Scars are hugely detrimental to going back to the Chinese medicine. I'm sure Gudango could talk about that, detrimental to the meridian lines and the energy and things like that. One of the most detrimental scars that I generally see is with women with C-sections, because of the central meridian and running through the body, and everything like that. My wife has had 2 C-sections, so scars are hugely detrimental. But same with tattoos, and trust me, I love tattoos. They're fucking addictive. But they can cause some energetic issues as far as being part of the skin.
Are they fixable? Like if anybody had, like, let's say somebody didn't want to get tattoos, they had to get surgery because, pregnancy or an injury.
Yes. Yeah. So you find a practitioner that can do a scar release. And then in posturology, they use, in France, they use a blend of essential oils. I couldn't tell you what was all in that, but I was trying to find that when I was studying posturology, and the only place that you can find it, and this is not a knock on Annette, but was Annette up in Posture Pro, and she's up in Montreal, and it was like $120. And again, I'm not trying to, it works. I'm just saying that for me, that's heavy, and plus it's coming all the way from Montreal, so it's not going to be here quick. So there's a company, I can get you the name of it, that I've used their essential oils for stimulating the brain and doing things like that. That I reached out to them and said, hey, would it be possible you can make this blend? And they said, yeah, why? Absolutely. So they ended up making a blend for me for scar release, and they added their own components because they're a bunch of body workers and massage therapists. So there's a scar release oil that we used that they also teach the technique with. I can send you the info on the name and stuff like that. But yeah, scars are hugely detrimental, and so this scar oil on top of a good scar release could release the negative effects.
What about scar? What about, I guess, do stretch marks count for any pregnant women that didn't have a C-section, or athletes like me that went from 225-pound high school athlete to 300-pound offensive lineman?
I don't know that answer, and I'm not going to lie to you with some bullshit. I don't know the effects.
You could have sold some fucking oil to me and a bunch of other people.
Dude, no. I don't know that. I have not looked into they never, in any of the courses I've come across, talked about the effects of stretch marks. They just talk about the effects of tattoos and scars.
I never would have thought about that, but I guess you're right. It makes sense as to, you're putting all this sensory input, and then my massage therapist, he talks about, and this is probably something that you would 100% agree with, is that energy can never be created. It's, just transferred. So you're now accepting all of that energy from the, the needle and the ink into your body. Now, where does it go? It goes into your fascia, it goes into your skin. And how do you, remove all of that?
Yeah. Time and surgery.
Dude. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to, bounce off each other's brain? Cause that's a lot of the notes that I had written down. The braces thing. How to braces? Is it just cause, again, the jaw, is this purely just braces to fix the teeth, or when there's like a broken jaw, like Kanye West?
Metal in the body. So we are electrical beings, right? And so metal conducts electricity. So now all of a sudden we put metal really close to the brain and not expect it to have a electrical effect on one of the most electrical parts of our fucking body. You know what I mean? So it has an effect. So that's why I'm a big fan of what's the clear things now the kids are wearing, the clear braces.
Invisalign, I think.
Invisalign, yeah, thank you. I think that is a far better option for that. So also, that one of the things we ask in posturology, especially with adults, is do you have any metal fillings and things like that? Because again, that can all have an effect. And we've maybe you've seen this being around teenagers and stuff like that, but attitude changes, and there's, trust me, there's a lot of reasons for
I've
it.
seen it. I've
But
seen some fucking
but you get
attitude
some
changes.
you get some, yeah, you get some 2D teenagers, and then we've seen them get their braces off, and their attitudes change, their personalities change, because for whatever reason. Again, there's a lot of reasons to that, but I tend to believe that. The Body Electric is a great book that I highly recommend everyone check out, and learn more about the negative effects of EMF and Wi-Fi and even the Bluetooth that's in my ears and all this shit. But yeah, metal is so. I mean, shit. The Apple Watches we wear. I don't wear Apple Watch. I don't wear any watches now. Yeah, sorry, bro. I'm not putting electrical non-native EMF on my pulse.
Wow.
What is it doing?
Just pull the tinfoil hat up on your head.
Hey man, I'll be that guy. Put me with Weck, I guess, in that fucking tinfoil.
One thing
Yeah,
I did write down, meditation. How does meditation, does it play any role in any of this, or you're just like, nah, different
Oh,
category?
100%. Yeah, dude, I think meditation's fantastic. For down-regulating an already crazy nervous system that 99.9 of us already have, to collecting thoughts, to breathing techniques, to just I think meditation's fantastic. Absolutely.
So it kind of rolls into any of this, or does it roll into any of this vestibular system training or any of the Melillo work that you were talking about, or is it just kind of like a...
Not meditation directly, but usually when you're meditating, you're doing breathing, and you're drawing sometimes a conscious thought to your breathing. And so we'll do breathing techniques. You have kids with a heightened Marl reflex, a fear paralysis reflex. They're generally the kids with high anxiety. So one of the first things you want to do is calm that. So a couple different ways to do that. And I have one boy particularly I do this with. We'll do box breathing, and then I'll spin him in a chair, and then he's usually much calmer.
You spin them or you rock them?
Spin him. I'll spin him.
Now,
We got all the weird shit that goes on at our gym.
I'm really concerned
What's
about
that?
my watch now.
Bro, we've done postural assessments with people with their Apple Watch on and off, big changes. I had this one lady, speaking of scars, she had, I don't know what the surgery is, but she had a scar right here.
Yeah.
And so I did a postural assessment. She had
Tracheotomy, right?
yeah, she had a pretty big forward head posture. So I did a quick little release, and we put the oil on it, and her head posture went back at least 2 fingers from the plumb line that we use, and stuff like that. So yeah, we've had guys take on and off their wedding rings and seen big changes in their posture.
What if you
If
get
from
your
the
tattooed?
position?
Is that better?
They had more swag without the ring, didn't they? Especially with the drink.
Yeah,
Just
all of a sudden
like
the
moving
balls got a
around.
little lower with it. So yeah, yeah.
What about anybody that they'll talk about wearing like stainless steel or the metal, so like a bracelet or a necklace to. I've heard those things
Again,
too.
yeah,
as
there's
you're talking about the watch.
Again, we go through that through the posturology course. Talk about necklaces and metals. There's ways to change the frequency of that. I forgot what I have the notes somewhere. There's something you can like. It doesn't ruin the chain or the necklace, but there's something like a little paint, or it's not paint, but it's just some kind of like something you can paint onto it that desensitizes the magnetism of the necklace and the stuff. So, because yeah, telling women to not wear jewelry is a hard fucking sell. I'll tell you that. And so, all right, so okay, here, try this stuff with it, and that way we can both be happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I said, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Because these were all my notes I had from you, man. I appreciate it.
No, man, I just appreciate you guys' time. It's just, for me, with the course, and I think it's a great course and awesome content. It's just now, how do I market that? Because, one of the things we had to do was try to make a promotional thing, and then some funnels, and it's like, okay, what am I trying to funnel to, and what am I trying to make these promotional things to? Okay, I can't say I can get you out of pain in 5 weeks, because I can't make that claim. I know I can get you out of pain, but I can't make that fucking claim. Because then otherwise I'm fucked. And then
You make a move better though, no?
yes, you know what I mean?
Feel
So
pain-free.
it's just, and then some people, I mean, 95% of the people that I've come across don't know what primitive reflexes are. I've never heard of it. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, now I got to go through this whole, okay, this is what it is, and this is what it is, and this is how it affects you, and like,
Link it into paleo, bro.
Yeah, right.
Seriously, people know paleo. Hey, our ancestors and all that shit. No, like,
It's not really related to that necessarily, but like I had a mother reach out to me about her daughter. She's a competitive dancer and wants to work on flexibility. I said, okay, what particularly looking to improve on with her? Her ankles are really tight. She was a toe walker when she was a kid. Boom, primitive reflex. Well, no wonder all the physical therapy she's been doing for years hasn't improved that, because she has retained primitive reflexes. So toe walking is a sign of retained primitive reflexes.
boom, Jeff Moyer, motherfuckers.
Yeah, so, anywho, it's just okay. Now, how do we bring that to the sports world? And like Dan Fictor's doing a great job with it. He does a better job of me marketing that stuff. He's someone you guys should get on a call. He's an interesting fella. But I don't know. I'm just not that savvy of a business person to come up with, hey, you're fucked up. Come see me.
That's why you got to call him Kier.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, man. Appreciate you, and have a good rest of the day.
You too, man. Thanks, boys.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.